Sales is one of the most misunderstood professions in the commercial world. When we think of sales, we often have very negative associations. We think about the pushy salesperson who we encounter during our family vacations. We think about the person who kept calling us 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 times when we constantly told them, please do not call again, and they tried to push their products and services on us. We think about the movies we watched. We think about people who have no ethics, who are ruthless, who have no morals, and who don't even flinch lying into people's faces, who abuse trust, and who do anything in their power just to get their numbers at the expense of everybody else. That's the stereotypical view of what a salesperson is. Transactional, sleazy, fast talking, and just barely breathing, just bombarding the potential customer or victim, if you want, to into submission and hoping that this person will just buy by giving up and not being able to resist the pressure anymore. And those salespeople exist, and those sales cultures exist as well. Now, the results speak most of the time for themselves. Those are not really successful salespeople or organizations anyway, except for in the short term. And this is where the danger lies. In the short term, it's always possible to take advantage of people, to screw them over, because they trust you. That trust is the open door that's being exploited. It's in the mid and long term that the consequences are felt. Once the word spreads, once customers or potential customers speak with each other, once the customer review platforms or Google reviews start showing what is actually happening, how potential customers feel about how they're being talked to, that's when you pay the bill for a rotten, corrupt sales culture. And it's those businesses that then over time, not right away, but over time, go bust because they erode the very foundations that they would need to be commercially successful in the mid and long term. Now, how do we fix this, or what does this mean for us if we are running a sales team, if we run a sales organization, if we are company leaders who have a sales function within our company? That's often admired, often resented, and most people probably feel intimidated by it. And the reason why a lot of other company departments also are at odds with the sales function is salespeople can not only come across pushy towards customers, but also towards their colleagues and other departments. And especially that is felt by the product department or the marketing departments, also to some extent by the customer success department. And there's one thing you need to really understand institutionally. A sales team or a sales organization, a sales function, is the one function that gets the most pressure out of everyone. Of course, not to diminish the pressure that a founder and owner has on running their company and certain management functions have, but most of the time it's the sales team whose jobs are on the line every single day. If they do not perform well for a week, for 5 working days, there could be questions about if they should be part of the company anymore. It's not the same in the product team. It's not like that in marketing. It's not like that in HR. If a recruiter doesn't hit their acquisition targets, talent acquisition targets for a week, nobody talks about firing them. But that's the reality in many sales teams. So salespeople are under a very unique pressure to perform. They are under unique urgency. Whenever something doesn't look right, the management team is on top of them. The founders, owners are often involved, and rightly so, because they also have pressure by the investors or by the public to show growth, to show that there's revenue growth, to show that the product sells. So keeping all of these things in mind, right? We have the negative stereotypes about salespeople. We have the unique pressures that they're exposed to in the organization. We have the dynamics that they have with others. That creates a landscape of a lot of distrust towards the sales profession and the sales function. But I'm here to dispel a couple of those mythologies and a couple of those misrepresentations. First off, sales. If you think about it on a meta level, like don't think about the person, the head of sales who is coming into the office, talking like a cowboy, and who you reject and despise. Think about it on a meta level. Sales is, I have a product as a company that I developed, and I want to connect this product or service with a potential customer. Now take away the words customer and product, which you typically think about. Think about just you have a person, an individual, a citizen, a resident. You have a person with dreams, with fears, with ambitions. And that person in the B2C sector has personal needs. On the B2B sector as part of an organization or company, that person faces certain problems, or again, has dreams, ambitions, needs, and has fears. And whatever is happening in their reality, they probably want to find a solution for those problems that they're encountering. Now, in the world we live in the type of commercial economic system that we live in, it's now companies, it's private companies that find solutions for those problems. Give you one of the most simple basic examples. You have a person whose relative lives abroad. Now the problem is, how can I communicate with my relative, right? Here you go, you have private companies like Apple, Samsung and others that actually produce and sell mobile phones. That solves the problem, that adds value to this individual person. Now if you really take away customer and services and product and all the commercial lingo, you're dealing with something that's in theory very noble. Problems, and there are companies, there are institutions, there are entities that basically produce solutions that add value to those individuals. Those individuals financially reward those entities and say, okay, thank you, I pay my $800, $1,000 for my iPhone. That solves my problem. Here are your $800. Now you're financially rewarded for this. With this money, this entity can now actually create more awareness and tell more people who have relatives abroad, we actually have a solution to your problem. And the bridge to this is the sales function, or the marketing function first, right? But then also the sales function. And if you see sales from that angle, then you would naturally think that sales is about solving customer problems. Sales is about matching the right person out there with the product that you're offering. Now, the issue is, of course, if you have developed a product, you're very much attached to it, right? In terms of, as a company, you just want to sell it. And now you have investor pressure and whatnot, and you need to show success. What often happens though is you start now forcing an existing solution on a problem that may or may not exist. Maybe you developed an app that is amazing. It took a lot of work to develop, but there is nobody really who has demand for it. There's nobody really who needs this type of app that you created. Now what do? You start hiring an aggressive sales team and just push it on people and hope to sell it anyway, just by force of personality. And this is where the trust gets broken. And this is often where you find the most unethical sales behaviors, where the product or service doesn't really add value. It doesn't really solve a problem. And it is only through deception that you can actually sell it, because nobody sees the connection between their problems and it adding any value to their lives. Now, this puts you in the situation that if you're not careful, you are a solution that is looking for a problem. And sometimes market research can find that problem, but the equation is turned on its head. Ideally, your product would have been developed from the get-go as solving problems. Ideally, it would have been developed based on problems in the industry, based on problems in the world of end consumers. And now the solution that you're offering is actually a perfect match to this. And now you actually have an opportunity in sales to do sales the right way and to bridge the gap between the needs, the demand, and the supply that you have. Now, if that's not the case, then of course you see all the ruthless behaviors that everybody despises, and that is what actually ruins the reputation of sales as a function. If you take sales though from a more noble standpoint, if you from the get-go, and this is where I always say sales is not an isolated function, if from the get-go, as an owner, as a founder, as a principal, you started designing your product based on actual customer problems that actually adds value. And this is part of the DNA, that's part of the commercial logic of your entire company, not just of the sales team, but marketing thinks like this, product thinks like this, engineering thinks like this, everybody thinks like this. Now you have actually a shot at using your sales function to bridge the gap. What does this look like? You cannot solve a problem for somebody if you do not understand it. In my career in training salespeople, I've trained over 500 salespeople and their leaders in almost 20 different countries in Europe, in North America, South America, and the Middle East. I've always found that you cannot teach everybody exactly the same method. I've always found that in order to respect the local nuances of an industry, of a geography, you need to give people often more tenets and principles than actually very specific scripts or words to say, right? And that means you, also in me training people, I want them first of all to understand the psychology of sales and want them to understand the psychology of what they're actually doing, including solving customer problems. And now what does this actually look like when you train salespeople and when you set a new standard, when you find yourself in a situation where your sales team has been very transactional, very sleazy, and has ruined your market reputation? How do you turn this around, if you can even? It starts by changing your sales approach to centering the customer as the focal point of every single sales interaction. And how does this look like? You need to speak with them. Again, we're now assuming a setup in which you actually have demos, try sessions, or sales calls. Of course, there's product-led sales motions, right? There's selling through app downloads and then actually having buttons that pop up to sell. This is a different story. This is not what we cover here. But what we cover here is the human-to-human sales. And so in order to connect the product and the service with the customer needs, it requires a process of trust building, especially if you're an early stage company, because you cannot rely on a big brand to do the sale for you, to build the trust. This is actually something that salespeople from big brand companies have as an advantage. They often just come in to close the deal. Whereas if you are still building your brand, your product is new, your service is new in the industry, you need to create this trust. And how do you build trust? Trust, often people think, is all about showing credibility. Hey, my name is Chris. I'm an advisor, or I'm a customer advocate here at the company X, Y, and Z, whatever the title is. I want to tell you a bit about our company before we go ahead. We have been founded in 2008. We have been around for a very long time. We have enterprise clients here and there, and we have really big contracts. And just keep rattling off basically your credibility markers, your social status, social proof markers. Now, whereas this is important, especially when closing the deal, especially in B2B and enterprise, it just doesn't create the level of trust that you need on a personal level. Trust is not created by you talking a lot. Trust is not created by you showing off your credentials. Trust is shown by you actually being interested in the other person and their world. One methodology or one framework that I'm using is consultative selling. Consultative selling can be compared to a doctor's visit. If you walk into a doctor's office and you tell the doctor, I have a lung infection, the doctor will raise their eyebrows at you and say, sit down for a moment. I have a few questions for you first. And they will ask you a few questions. They will take notes. They will not jump to conclusions. And they will say, you know what? I would like you now to take a blood test, and I would like you to go to a specialist to have your lungs checked. Come back to me with the results. And you do this, you come back, and only then the doctor, based on all the inputs that they collected, will make a judgment, will make an assessment and say, here is the product that you need. Here is either the treatment that you need or the medications that you should get from the pharmacy. Now, you trust the doctor. The doctor is not sitting there rattling off their credentials. The doctor is not sitting there talking for 5 hours. The doctor is also not taking you at your word, but the doctor is asking questions and is listening. And that's a parallel to consultative selling, which again, you don't need to be stuck to the word or the method of consultative selling. It's just human psychology in general. If as salespeople we spend more time talking than listening, we're burning bridges. The ideal ratio is typically 70% listening and asking questions and letting the potential customer speak, and then having 30% to actually close the deal. And how does this look like in practice? If I ask questions, and of course there are different ways of doing this, we're not going into specifics now. There are very confrontational ways of doing it, which are not really helpful. There are very robotic ways of doing it, which are also not helpful. But there's also a way of actually having a structured conversation that flows and is organic, that builds trust. If I allow the potential customer to speak about their world, to speak about what is going on in their world, if I give them the space to actually express that, and with my questioning, I actually am able, just by the question alone, to help them get a different angle at their own situation. I now almost help them upload what is going on into their mind in the moment, which means if I would just come in and sell and say, hey, I'm selling a software solution for accounting purposes, they say, yeah, okay, not interested right now. But if I actually allow a conversation in which we talk about what is going on in their accounting and what the challenges are, what is working well, and so forth, we just have a natural conversation about this. And during this conversation, we also figure out what are the weak points of accounting. We have basically a subject matter discussion. Now, all of this is present. And if at the end of the conversation, I'm saying, hey, based on what you told me, it sounds like we might be able to help you, and let me tell you a bit about what we are doing. And now you actually earned the right to speak yourself because you allowed the other person to speak first. Then now you can actually really connect what we said earlier. You connect the solution that you have, the solution that you're offering, with the actual world of the customer, with the problems and the issues that they are facing on a day-to-day. You're really solving their problem. And this requires an entire shift from cowboy macho sales cultures, where it's all about taking advantage of people, taking advantage of customers, to do we, and this goes beyond sales, do we as a company actually understand the world that our customers, potential customers, live in? Do we understand what keeps them up at night? If we don't, if you just see them as a market opportunity, if we see them as a TAM, a total addressable market, if you don't really understand anything about them except for, we want to sell to them, then everything we do on the product side, on the types of people we are hiring, on the sales team, on the marketing side, will just miss the mark. And we will almost certainly have to revert back to unethical sales practices because the investors are pressuring us to show growth. So selling is more than just a few techniques and methodologies. And of course, there's way more to be said about consultative selling, but it's just to illustrate some of its core principles. Selling needs to start with the problem of the customer, and selling needs to have an intention of adding value to them. If it doesn't, and if your product cannot even do this, then maybe you shouldn't even be selling this product. I think there are some hard questions to be asked anyway about why you're even in business if your product doesn't solve problems and it doesn't add value, right? Sometimes it needs adjustments, but we need to think beyond sales in order to be commercially successful. And of course, once we have the let's say the core commercial logic, the core commercial source code in place, we also need to go one step further. And once those customers are with us and they have been sold to once, how do we have additional transaction? And if you have already broken trust in order to get the first customer acquisition, if you lie to them, if they feel very uneasy and uncomfortable about being your customer, how likely do you think they're going to be to buy from you again? But if at some point as an owner, as a founder, as a principal, you want to sell your company, or you want to actually cash out, you want to move on, you want to transfer the company to a new owner, your net revenue retention, what actually happens after the sale, your upselling, your expansion revenue, your retention, all of this will be highly critically important. And it's very unlikely that you will get really far in terms of your valuation and your enterprise value if you focus only on short-term one-off transactions that simultaneously ruin your market reputation and basically erode the foundations for long-term success, and obviously will not lead to any retention and renewals. So I'd like to invite you to have a clear-eyed look onto your commercial engine and think about what is the source code that is running your sales and marketing team. Also, what is the source code that is running your top management decisions? Do we understand the customers on a deeper level? Do we actually address what is happening in their world? And is everything that we're doing in this company geared towards this? Because again, it's not just about the first step, which is the first customer acquisition, it's also about how do we keep those customers? How do we upsell? How do we create new products for them so they want to stick with us? Because we already spend a lot of money on their marketing and sales. And this will ultimately decide the fate of this company. If it will be valuable in the mid and long term, if it can be sold, if it creates a good multiple, if investors give it a good multiple. A lot of this has to do with the customers and how you treat them. And again, customer reviews are great, but this is not what we're looking for. We look for customer retention and renewals, and this can only take place if the customers actually trust us. And trust is created on every single interaction point along the customer journey, starting with the first impression in marketing or through an introduction, all the way to the sales process and to what happens after the sale.